Here's Haliburton into the front court. Mishandled it, but gets a shot. Hits it! Hits it!
John, I have never been better to be on the air with you here in Indianapolis, a place where so many of my dreams have come true.
The Ride with JMV on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
I got a lot to talk about today. Thank you all for joining us. Got tickets to give away. I'll tell you what we're giving away, James. I'm assuming you've seen this as well, right? I know people are going to like it a great deal. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. The guest list, we got a first-timer on the show. A first-timer on the show in the 4 o'clock hour, and what the week entails, too, including being on the road on Thursday, Southside, NBA Jam, and Michelob Ultra, another opportunity. That and more in what was an incredibly busy weekend. I'm going to go ahead and start with the Pacers. I know a lot of people want to go ahead and jump on the bandwagon of fire Mike Woodson, and Mike Woodson has to go. And I think everybody, well, I will say this. I will say that is a game on Saturday that if you're Mike Woodson and that staff, you just can't have it. You can't have that. And you could say, well, they did. What are you going to do? Well, it takes you down a path. Even if you have next year, even if you have the end of this year and next year, which clearly he's going to have, you have set the bar now with the fan base to where you're going to have to do some incredible things between now and that time to get back in the good graces. I realize that the fans don't have a call in this. I do. You know, the board of trustees, the athletic director, all of that weighs into it. But, you know, if you put out a product where people get sick and tired of going, get sick and tired of hearing everybody all over your coach, or if you just get sick and tired of taking a beating at the hands of a Penn State team without their leading scorer, arguably their best player, then you've got yourself a problem. And I think right now with Mike Woodson, the issue is I don't think that he and they can do enough for him to ever get back. Get back to that coming up in a minute, too. My Sycamores, the Boilermakers yesterday, just impressive on the road against Wisconsin. But Butler on Friday night on the road against Creighton. Talk about gutting one out. It kind of looks like, if you watch, it looks like that those that they have brought together, Thad Matta has brought together with that group, at least on that night, maybe even you can argue the past two against the better teams. Villanova, not as good as normal, but Creighton is certainly legit. They have to go on the road to UConn, but you get guys that look like that they were coming together. They shot the lights out in the second half and still needed absolutely everything because late they couldn't inbound the ball. But that was a gritty performance. It was an enjoyable watch, especially coming off of that Pacer game against Sacramento where I just about had to turn that off. Yeah, so you go ahead and stagger the minutes so Haliburton could play, yet you can't play him in that because it's an absolute mess. Now, the good thing for the Pacers is they got a win last night in Charlotte. The Hornets are an absolute disaster. If you watch that game, besides P.J. Washington and Brandon Miller, it's Miles Bridges, whom two of those three, not the rookie Miller, but two of those three are going to end up being traded as they reset absolutely everything. The Pacers carve out themselves a win that was incredibly necessary. But now we have a lot of questions, right, forming. People are asking me about Buddy Hield once again. NBA trade deadline's coming up on Thursday. And I got everybody's thought that there's no way in the world Buddy's going to be on this team. Did you see the way that Buddy treated the coach? He was mad and he was yelling at people. Let me tell you what happened in the fourth when Buddy Hield got yanked. First of all, if you've ever slumped in anything, and this is not making excuses for him, I'm not trying to let him lay down, in this case, on a bed of rose petals and make sure that nobody comes at him with any criticism. He hadn't been good. When you are in a slump and whatever you do, you're just ready to lash out. And I don't care how professional you are. And there are moments in which you just kind of go over the top. And you saw that moment yesterday And the Pacers, at the start of the fourth quarter, were just turning the ball over. And you could tell that Rick wanted to give the starters more rest, but he was kind of forced into putting them back because those that were in there to start the fourth just could not keep control of the ball. And one of those particular plays, it was Obi Toppin. Obi Toppin with the board, goes the other direction, throws an outlet pass on the left wing, extended toward the sideline. That was one of the world's worst passes. It was just a bad pass. So Buddy Hield didn't catch it. It goes out of bounds. And if you saw Buddy's reaction, he was not fond of that pass. Now, we haven't seen a lot of this, really, if any of it, from teammate to teammate. But at that moment, Buddy Hield to Obi Toppin, that's what you saw. But you also have to keep in mind a couple of things, and one of which you like about this team. Now, the first is obvious. You're just incredibly pissy because you can't throw it in the ocean if you fell out of a boat. I may have mixed that particular metaphor right there, but I think it still sounded okay. So you can't do anything with the basketball. And again, the one thing that you're supposed to be able to do is shoot it. And he has not been able to shoot it. And he's missing a lot of dead-ass, wide-open shots. It's not like it's under a heavy contest or anything. Like wide open where you're thinking like normal Buddy Hield, everybody's running the other direction. You can tell by the players sometimes too. You can tell by the players when somebody gets that wide open and shoots into somebody they trust, these guys will get a bit of a head start sometimes on going to the other end, the defensive end. So a couple of different times yesterday, he's wide open look from the wing, and it's Buddy Hield, and he's going to knock it down, and these guys take a step or two the other direction, and it's short. His stuff, for the most part, is all short right now. So I don't know if he's tired, a little bit worn down, needs a break, but a lot of his stuff is short. And when you're in a slump in whatever you do, and in this case, as a basketball player, in that shooting slump, you're not happy. All right, this is your trade. This is what you're supposed to be able to do. You're not going to be able to go out there. They don't expect you to check somebody full-on defensive mode. They don't expect a lot of rebounds. They don't expect you to be a drive and dish type of guy. You're there. So if they make an extra pass, or maybe you get a cross-court pass of some kind, a skip pass of some time, you're going to be wide open coming off of screens. You're going to shoot that three. Or even what we know Buddy Hield to be, being able to shoot it under duress. So the Obi Toppin pass was not anywhere in the zip code. Goes out of bounds. And if you watched it a little bit more, I actually went back and watched the reaction. You could tell Buddy knew that because the way that he was playing, and really the way that group was playing, that his time was going to be limited. So at that moment, he knew he was coming out, and he was pissed about the pass, or lack thereof a good pass from Obi, and started chirping on the bench. And you could see Miles got up, and I couldn't tell exactly what he said, but it looked like he said, "You need to run down to the other end. You need to keep playing." Or, "This is not what we do. This is not what we're about." And then you could also tell after that play, when they started subbing that unit out, you could tell that Obi was explaining himself as it being a bad pass. So a lot of people were asking me, man, he's on Carlisle. For one, he doesn't want to come out. Another, he knows that he's not in a good spot right now. He knows that what he is uniquely used to doing, really at a very high level, is not happening right now. So he was frustrated, and that frustration boiled over. But the good part I was talking about is that this group, and I've asked this before, I think it was Aaron Neesmith. I may have asked Miles this once. Hell, I can't remember. Maybe even TJ McConnell. But these guys really do a great job of self-policing. And that's how you can tell. I mean, everybody kind of looks at how they're, you giggle on the sidelines and you look like you're around one another. But, man, it really is those incredibly crappy moments that you're going through to where frustrations can boil over with one or two, and then it's, hey, everybody chill out. All right, you'll make the next one. go down there and make sure at the very least, even if you can't guard this guy, you kind of act like you can stand in front of him. All right, you may not guard your yard, but like one step left and one step right, you'll have that covered. And in all likelihood, you're going to get subbed out. Because really, you didn't want to mess around with that game. I mean, it was clunky enough the way that it was. I mean, really what you wanted to do, you wanted to get a win. You didn't want them to be any circumstances, and you wanted to get the hell out of Dodge and get ready for tomorrow night's matchup with Houston here. That's what you wanted to do. And then ultimately, that is how they succeeded. But you like a team that will direct itself. Now listen, the coaches, whether it's Carlisle or Pierce, will have something to say about it. I just thought when everybody else was saying, this is a bad thing, I can't believe this, you got to trade Buddy Hield. You don't trade Buddy Hield unless it makes sense to you, unless you say, you know what, this guy is not going to be the same type of threat that he's ever been again, and we don't want him again. You can't jack with your offense. You just can't. You're not good enough defensively to do it. And while I like Jarris Walker and I understand that you want to get him in the game, you want to get him in the game when you can, but you don't want to sacrifice the moments when you need somebody else. Your expectation is now that you get, what are they averaging? Look up, James, what they average. About 124, somewhere in that neighborhood, 123. They really haven't been hitting their average recently, and we've given that a pass. We've given that a pass because dudes have been injured. There's been no Haliburton. You just made a big deal. Everybody's getting used to this and everybody's getting used to that. But what you cannot get used to is not scoring to the level in which we believe or you believe you should or where you have. It may work against a team like Charlotte that stinks. But you get in there against a good team that's going to match you shot for shot, and then feel good. You're not going to get late stops. They're going to get a late stop. That is problematic. So I'd be careful, and I would trust. Chad Buchanan last week on this show, the Pacer general manager, it sounded to me, as I'm assuming it sounded to you, when I asked him these very questions about Buddy, about another deal, he said, we made this big deal already. And to me, he talked like that he was done. Now, again, you fast forward now a week, maybe things are different. But I certainly don't think it's because of the attitude. I don't think it's because of the feel of the team. What's the average right now, James?
It says it's 124.2.
124.2. They have not been in that ballpark for a while. Once upon a time, a month or so ago, they were going over 125. Like, you want them to get better defensively, but you do not want to jack around with the offense. Don't do it. And believe me, before you say there's no reason to keep, I understand he's going to struggle if he's not knocking down the three. Consequently, however, you're going to struggle if he isn't knocking down the three. So if you don't have a better thought, if you don't have a better action, another example in mind that's going to keep up this pace that you're going to give up right now with him, I know he doesn't look great. I just think in the court of public opinion, you're always way too quick to want to trade somebody. You have not seen what this team is capable of doing enough. That was something else that Chad Buchanan talked about last week. You know, we just haven't seen enough of these guys playing together because of a variety of reasons. So I'd be quick to judge that this past week, for example, is the reason why Buddy Hield is going to be traded. I'd be too quick to judge in this case if you're suggesting, well, you saw how he acted on the sideline. See, I got the same stuff with Miles. Remember that championship game on that Saturday night in Vegas? I had like 1,000 jackasses say, well, Miles just left the floor because he's mad. We're going to trade him right now. And you don't know anything. Maybe you just don't want to throw a fit. I'm telling you what, if I throw a fit, I'm not like going to go out in the spotlight in front of everybody and throw a fit. I'm going to throw a fit where nobody sees me throwing a fit. That's the best place to throw a fit. But again, when Buddy Hield, and you could tell that he was emotional in that moment, the best part about that is that the players were handling it. As I mentioned, Miles got up, said, hey, we get down to the other end here. Drop it. It's over. So I'd be telling you to be advised not to be too quick to judge it. And especially considering what Chad Buchanan said last week. I have no intel on it whatsoever. I would also be very careful in trying to juggle what you have right now offensively. You just simply can't afford to continue to fall with your average every game. I know that really that's not what – there are so many different levels of analytics. I mentioned this to Frank Vogel a couple of weeks ago, the head coach of the Suns. He was looking at these analytics that are today, now, and I'm looking at analytics that they probably looked at in 1995. But we all know this. We all know that getting up and down the floor, scoring, utilizing that. I mean, what they have done against Milwaukee, winning 4 or 5 this year, that, to me, should be a blueprint of how this team has to win with this group, and that is you wear other people out. And they just haven't had the opportunity to do it because some guy's out, this guy's out. Haliburton can only play 22, and he's on, the unicycle, not on the unicycle. That would be pretty funny if he would be. He's on the stationary bike, working out, whatever. But you can't compromise your offense. And it really makes me feel good to say that. Because normally, like any place you want to go with this team, you can directly go to the defense, and you're not going to be wrong. But I have said this all along. Don't forget about what has really brought you here. What gets you excited about this team, because it sure as hell isn't the defense. It is the offense. It is their capability of running another team ragged to where they're just simply not good late. Giannis wasn't good for the most part late in a lot of those games. What, they won 1 of 5? I shouldn't say a lot. That's really overstating it. But you could tell in moments when he was gassed because he told you after those games when he was gassed. You could tell when Lillard didn't have his legs, but he was gassed. You sure as hell can tell when Middleton's gassed. I just don't think you can afford, and I know that you go through a long season and you get worn down, and I know that your offensive average is just going to fall, but you cannot lose sight of the importance of it. I know when you get in the postseason, the defense is going to take over. But again, remember, late defensive stops when it matters. That's what I want to focus in on. This team is not going to take you away from what you want to do for 3.5 quarters defensively. It isn't. But it can wear you out enough. And then if they have a stop or two late, can be a difference in the game. This is by far not a finished product. I just don't feel any differently sitting here today than I did this time last week after Chad Buchanan was on the show. Now, even with this lengthy slump that Buddy Hield is in right now. Hey, by the way, last week, I know Miles missed the game on Friday. Was it an ankle or a back? Ankle? His back had been an issue. I thought it said ankle. And I had sent actually something to Jeremiah Johnson last night. He still doesn't look right. He doesn't look right to me. And believe me, if anybody were to know outside of him that he doesn't look right, I'd be right there. Because I got to watch for some of these clowns that are with me on this show and thank you. God love you for being a part of this show. But with the clowns, they also have to embrace. I've got to watch every breath he takes out there. Seriously. And I'm not trying to be Sting here. I got to watch every move he makes, every step he takes. I'll be watching him. Guys, force me into that. Yeah, I don't know what is going to be going on in this all-star break for him, but I think my man needs a rest right there a little bit. Pacers and the Rockets coming up tomorrow night. That's going to be far from easy right there. We shall discuss coming up in a minute. We will start with the winners. Boilermakers, absolutely fantastic. Listen, I know what this means against Wisconsin, and I know what this means against Wisconsin's backcourt. I don't know if you automatically say, well, this is absolutely different and they're going to have no problems. Purdue is going to have, Purdue fans especially, you got to prove, this team is going to have to prove once they get into the NCAA tournament situation that it is different. This is just, to me, them doing what we expected them to do. Now, has Lance Jones been fantastic and factoring in a great deal to their success? And does it look different in the backcourt between he and Braden Smith? I thought Fletcher Lawyer played well yesterday. Absolutely. But as we've talked about, you just don't know until you see that matchup, until you see who they play. They are doing right now exactly what you would expect them to do. And that was certainly impressive yesterday. You got to figure, too, if you're Wisconsin, you had a 19-point lead that you gagged away in the second half and lost a couple of nights earlier in Lincoln, Nebraska to the Cornhuskers. And if there ever was an opportunity to have a do-over, a make-good, that was it. And while they hung around, which is exactly what you would expect them to do, Purdue never really let them significantly tie ball game or even believe that they could take the lead and do anything with it. And really impression all the way around. There's no doubt, I mentioned this to Jake a little bit earlier, where would some of these teams in the Big Ten be without the Missouri Valley Conference right now? You're talking about Lance Jones at Purdue, Marcus Damask at Illinois, Rink Mast, who played at Bradley in the Mo Valley, at Nebraska. Where would these teams be without the Missouri Valley? And I know that my Indiana State friends out there, I'm going to scare you by saying this. I mean, you watch, especially in this era of college basketball, you just got to go for it. If you're Indiana State, you got to go for it. You know, if you're Bradley, if you're Drake, right now in the Mo Valley, you got to go for it because you don't know how your cupboard will end up being rated. You think about this significant spotlight that my fighting trees have on them right now. Everybody is seeing it. And we got the Wild West. I know that there are rules. Come on, rules. I mean, really, nobody abided by the rules when there actually were rules. I mean, now all you got to do is you see a big with a soft touch and a pass and, man, getting all this notoriety. So, again, if you're Indiana State, got to make it happen and make it happen right now. Sycamores win a big one over Drake on Saturday night. I believe they are 28th in the country. Not enough votage. I think they got 53 to get in today. Not enough votes to make it in to the top 25. I don't vote. I'd have voted like 19 times. I'll vote like 19 times right here. Get them in. They do go through moments where they can't hit anything either. But some of their bigger moments, larger moments come at the end of games. And that may have been the in-game situations. Tucker DeVries, that is the star player for Drake, is good. He is a combination of good in so many areas offensively. And Indiana State stepped up defensively. Conwell had a big play. Kent had a big play. Every reason for Sycamore fans to maintain a level of excitement, and that is a good thing. I'd like to spend a lot of time on IU, but I don't know what else to say. I think you sit here right now with Mike Woodson, and you know that he's not going to get fired. You know he's not going to go anyplace, but I just don't see how he's ever going to get it back. That trust from the fans. And you can say, well, they don't matter, but in a lot of sports, and especially this one, they do. There's some mattering going on there. That game on Saturday was an absolute killer. That was one of those where you go, all right, I'm going to consider to get rid of everybody. Well, it's just IU. You've seen IU recently, and you cannot look and then lose as they did at home. I know they did. Can't do it. To a Penn State team without its leading scorer. Sometimes in that second half, Mike Woodson mentioned they came out flat, and I've always said this. At times in that second half, it looked like that the fans were pushing and more excited about getting this team back in the game than that team was about getting themselves back in the game. That is so problematic. And we can sit around and talk about no guards here, no shooting there, all the issues here and there, whatever. But this team, for the most part, has been disappointing in terms of trying to help itself. We're not talking about playing Kansas every single game or playing Purdue every single game or the best. That was Penn State. That was at home. Yeah, I'm sorry. That should be a gimme. I know nothing is a gimme with this group. You just can't look like that. The gimme looked like it was Penn State on the road. That just can't happen. Can't happen. Not go anywhere. No doubt about that. Staying right there. He's going to coach again next year. But as far as getting back in the good graces of most whom aren't making the decisions, they may end up making the decisions as far as their level of interest. There are so many aspects of this that remind you of just the ill-fated Archie Miller era. That game Saturday would be one of those. Can't happen, and it did. Quick break, and we shall return. I got a lot more to talk about coming up, too. Bobby Riddell, the Boilermaker Radio Network, is going to join us coming up at the top of the hour. Stephen Holder, coming back from the Pro Bowl, I believe, is going to join us in the 5 o'clock hour. We've got Mike DeCourcy, the Big Ten Network, coming up on the other side. Luke Bryan tickets, correct? Luke Bryan. I've got Luke Bryan tickets for you country music fans out there as well. Great moment on the Grammys last night. Tracy Chapman and Luke Combs. That was pretty awesome. And, of course, if you follow social media, you can't have a moment like that without people, being pissy about it or wanting to argue about it. Like, I don't know too much about Luke Combs, but I do know this. I do know what is entertaining in music, and that was incredibly entertaining and moving in music. Why was he out there with her? Why was he necessary? Well, he redid the song. There's a reason why it came back out popular again. Why do you have to – I understand if things are going wrong, we have to gripe about it, but why do you have to gripe about stuff that you shouldn't have to gripe about? Somebody tell me that. Let's fix it. Quick break. We'll come back. The stream, the app inside the AAA membership lounge via YouTube Live. Mike DeCourcy is going to talk some college hoop and the Mike DeCourcy NCAA tournament forecast coming up as well. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Pacers are breaking all the rules.
Every day. Good. So what's the problem? I don't know.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Bobby Buckets coming up here in the 4 o'clock hour. Stephen Holder of ESPN is going to be here. Thursday show, me, NBA Jam, and Michelob Ultra is at Whiskey Business, Southport Road on the south side. Again, you get the shoes, the custom-made courtside Nike Air Michelob Ultra shoes. They're one of one. They're originals. And then you advance with that high score to the finals coming up here, too. Again, Whiskey Business, Southport Road, south side. That is coming up on Thursday with the show. Meantime, on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, from Big Ten Network. You watched him last night, which was a fun-as-hell game to watch in Champaign between Nebraska and Illinois. Got a great breakdown before, during, and after. Mike DeCourcy was part of the crew. He joins us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Hello, Mike. How are you?
JMV, how are you?
What would the Big Ten be without the Missouri Valley Conference?
Well, I don't understand the correlation there.
Oh, Lance Jones. Rink
I see
Mast,
what you mean now. Absolutely.
Marcus Damask. So, yeah. Keep in mind here, Mike, I'm always trying to squeeze the Missouri Valley Conference and my Indiana State team into any conversation I can. So, what would the Big Ten be like without the influence of the Valley?
Well, I'm telling you, those two guys, and the weird thing about that is you've got one of the best players on Illinois and one of the best players on Purdue, two guys who, if they remain healthy through the regular season, will definitely be all league, whether it's first or second team or whatever, still remains to be seen, but they'll be all league without a doubt. And their team wasn't great last year.
Right.
At Southern Illinois, they were not even sure they were particularly good. It's hard to fathom because those two players are terrific.
Yeah, and I mean, really, when I talk about these three, and you're looking at, three of the better teams we have seen, certainly over the course of this Big Ten campaign, and without any of these three, I think Mass came from Bradley. I remember watching him, I think, last year, but without any of these three, I mean, really, Fred Hoiberg's team, Brad Underwood, certainly Matt Painter's team looked drastically different without their influences.
Absolutely, and I think that without Lance, I mean, Purdue's still making the tournament,
right?
And they probably still be a 1 seed. But you look at what Lance is capable of doing, and they wouldn't be the one overall. They wouldn't be a team that you'd say, yeah, this time it could be different. It would probably be different anyway. I mean, they're not going to go lose to a 16 again, but this time it could be different. And he's a huge part of the reason for that because he gives them a level of dynamism that last year's team did not have. He gives them experience in the backcourt that last year's team did not have. When you look at their 3-point shooting, they're one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country statistically. But then you look, okay, who do you trust in March to make those big shots? And I worried about Lance through November and December because the numbers weren't great. I think he was shooting down in the 32-33 range from three-point. And I was talking to Raphael Davis, my terrific co-partner, along with John Beeline on Big Ten Basketball and Beyond. And I said to him, who do you trust? And he said, Lance. And I said, but look at his numbers. And he said, yeah, but look lately. So I did. And since January 1, when Big Ten play resumed, he's shooting nearly 40% from three-point range. So the tougher the competition, in large part, I mean, obviously they played a great non-conference too, but now it's every night you're playing somebody that's tough, and he is shooting at the highest level you could possibly ask him to do.
He is Mike DeCourcy, the Big Ten Network on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. And I would add, too, I don't know how much of a relationship you can make between now and last year and that first game exit in the tournament in Columbus, but he's a dude that is shooting better, as you accurately state. He is unafraid of the situation, whereas against Fairleigh Dickinson last year, you get into the final 10 or so minutes, 8 or so minutes of that game, you had guys running from the basketball. He does not look to me like a dude that's ever in his life going to run from the basketball.
No, I don't think he will. I don't think they'll encounter that situation in particular again. It's just this team is better. You see progression from Fletcher Lawyer, absolutely around the entire roster. Braden Smith is spectacular. And a year ago, this was when Fletcher and Braden really started to wear down. And Braden, who had been so brilliant in the first 3 months of the season, was still fine, but he wasn't this. And Fletcher, until that last game, I thought one of the missed opportunities in the game against FDU was that he looked like he started to have a little bit of spark back in that game. He made some shots, and he wasn't getting the ball. The shots were going up from other directions that weren't on that night as effective as he was. But for the most part, in February and early March, he was struggling, just didn't look fresh. And I don't think you're going to see that. Now those guys have had a full offseason of weight and conditioning at the college level. It makes a huge difference. And then you add in a guy like Lance, and it really does look like a team. Like, I'm not predicting a national championship for them, but I think they can be in it. And the one thing I will predict is that they're not losing to a double-digit seed in the first round this time. I feel very confident about that.
So Mike DeCourcy, who was with us, give me a difference or two between National Player of the Year Zach Edey a year ago and what is, I think, going to be, again, back-to-back the first time since Ralph Sampson in the 80s, National Player of the Year Zach Edey this year. Give me a difference or two that you have in mind.
Yeah, I think he is much more active and mobile. It's harder to strand him defensively than it was a year ago. Teams would try to get him out of the post because they could go by him, and it's harder now. He moves really well in space. That's one of the reasons why the NBA is starting to talk about him as a first-round pick. Jonathan Givony, who I've known for 20 years and who does a really great job scouring the planet for basketball talent for ESPN, projected him in his mock lottery earlier last month, I should say, now that we're into February. And I did not see that coming, but he's talking to agents and NBA people all the time. And so that's coming from somebody reputable. That he's not going to put himself out there and his reputation as a draft analyst but on just his opinion that it could work. I mean, he's talking to people, and they're telling him that he's a different player now.
So Mike DeCourcy's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline with us. All right, I want to shift gears. I started with the winning and now to the losing. This Hoosier team, I know that we didn't have, big dreams. There were big hopes. There always will be from that fan base, but no big, visions of greatness because of what they lost, in terms of losing, especially with Jackson Davis and Hood Schifino of a year ago. But this is what you get. That game on Saturday is just one in their situation that you can't have, looking like they did, in particular in that second half. Moving forward, I know Mike Woods is not going any place, but it's going to take a lot for him to get back in those so-called good graces with the fan base really any time further down the road.
Well, I mean, I will say that, and I'm not saying that this happens, but if they start out next year 10-0, people will forget about what happened this year. It's a rebuilding year. Everybody will forget about it. But it was what happened on Saturday was shocking. If they had gone on the road to Penn State, not a lot of people in the stands because Penn State's they're not at the top of the league, and they sometimes struggle to fill their Bryce Jordan Center. So you go on the road to a place like that, and there's not a lot in it for you because you're probably not going to the Madness, and so maybe you'd put out an effort like that. But at home, in Assembly Hall, against a team that is near the bottom of your conference, that I never saw that coming. When they started out with an early lead, I thought they're gonna blow Penn State off this floor. I really felt that was going to happen, and it just completely flipped. And Penn State played with verve and passion and the desire that you want to see, and it wasn't met with the corresponding effort from Indiana, and I did not see that coming at all. I think this team needs it needs a lot. Even more than it needs talent. It needs some leadership. It needs frankly, they need a Lance Jones. Liam McNeely, who's coming in next year, will fill a lot of needs for them because they need to have more dynamism and a more scoring ability on the perimeter than they have now. But the other element of this, and this is something that I've talked about relative to Mike Woodson's approach for multiple years now, and they can't just keep pretending like Steph Curry never happened. I mean, everybody else is playing that game, and when you have maybe an elite post scorer like Trace Jackson-Davis, you can say, okay, we're still playing the old style, the Shaq style. You can do that if you have Trace, but there's only like one or two Traces every 8 or 9 years now. It's like there just aren't very many guys that know how to do that stuff. And even if you do have him, which they did a year ago, you're still better if you have 2 or 3 guys who can pop in threes, because it gives that guy more space to operate. So they need to recruit shooters, and they need to, when they have them, as they did a year ago with Miller Kopp, they need to take full advantage. They did not with Miller a year ago when you had that great post scoring that you got out of Trace. You still didn't take advantage of having a 45% three-point shooter on your squad. I think he shot between 120 and 140 last year. And I will tell you that on most teams that have a 46 or 45% three-point shooter who's a fifth-year senior, if you have that guy, he's taking over 200. And that didn't happen with Miller a year ago. That they just aren't emphasizing that element of the game enough.
You know, it's weird, too. What has been a consistent argument over the Mike Woodson tenure here so far in Bloomington is that he's too NBA-oriented, too asphyxiated on coaching, as he coached in the NBA. And that is one aspect, for whatever reason, and arguably the most important aspect that you don't fully embrace. That is, I think, what a lot of people, IU fans in general, do question.
But what I don't understand about that is, like, it's not like he was only a coach in the NBA up until 2010.
Right.
He coached in the NBA as recently as 5 years ago, and the whole Steph thing had already happened. So I don't know that – I know that there are things he does with some of his substitutions and things like that can be traced to the NBA. But the NBA had changed while he was working in it, and he was on teams that had to deal with it, either with their own approach – or with coping with every time you played the Warriors or those who played like them. So I don't think that that's the excuse or explanation. I just, for whatever reason, he hasn't embraced that with the Hoosiers program. And some of it is personnel. I mean, this team doesn't shoot the basketball well. They didn't recruit it enough in the offseason. They knowing that they were losing Miller, they needed to go out and get somebody who they could count on to make shots and make them immediately. I know they were involved with a high school prospect who was a big-time shooter that they didn't get, but that player's not playing now. I don't think that he was ready for D1. I don't think he would have been a difference here. They needed to be in the portal looking for somebody that has made threes. One thing I'll say, JMV, when I look at a transfer, when we see all these transfers, these guys moving, and I concern myself not just with the Big Ten, but the whole country because of what I do for Sporting News. The first thing I look at when a perimeter player moves is what did he shoot where he was? And if he shot 38 or higher from three-point or 37 on high attempts, if you're in that neighborhood, you're going to be useful at your next school. Most guys are going to shoot around the number that they shot. It may dip or it may get higher, but most are going to be around that number. And so that's something that is fairly easily transferable from place to place because you get guys that are terrific shooters at the mid-major or low-major level, and all you have to do is emphasize it to take open shots, and it's still the same shot. It doesn't matter if it's somebody from Minnesota closing out on you or somebody from Mississippi Valley State. It's still if you're open, you're open, and so it translates, and that's something that Indiana in this particular offseason did not emphasize enough.
Mike DeCourcy's with us. Before I let you go, I do have a statement for you. For me, Dusty May is a high school friend of 35-plus years. Indiana State's my alma mater, and I cannot see another first-round matchup. I know I should feel good about the Sycamores, but damn, DeCourcy, you're screwing me here. Don't do it.
Here's the thing, JMV. Here's the thing you have to think about, okay? About 15 years ago, there was this big kerfuffle among advocates of mid-majors. Anytime you took like a Drake and a Western Kentucky and you match them in the first round. And my response to that was always, but that means one of them automatically has to play in the second round. So in a sense, you can't lose with that matchup.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, you're right, I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
They could both go out and get wiped in the first round, and then you'd be 0 for 2. This way, one of them's going to win.
Well, I was talking to Dusty the other day, and he's winning. When he wins games, they win by 5, and people were saying, well, they're not as good as last year because they're not blowing teams out and stuff. And that's what you deal with a team that hit the heights in which they did last year. But I should just be happy that Indiana State is getting in. That's what I need to be happy about here. So I understand.
The way they're playing, if they, I think at this point, if they continue with what they did on Saturday. If they continue on, now Bradley might be, a handful in the end, but if they can keep doing what they're doing and play in the final, I think they can get in either way. I mean, they have to keep. When I say keep doing what they're doing, I'm basically asking them to not lose. But I do believe that if they could do that and only lose in the final, preferably to Drake, I think they can make it.
Oh, that's about a sports arousal. Right there for me. That gets me all excited. We're all Sycamores around here. Mike DeCourcy, the Sporting News, of course, of the Big Ten Network. You can see his bracket forecast as well, I think, each week. Mike, I appreciate that more than you know. We'll check it again soon. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
So Mike DeCourcy on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Bobby Buckets, top of the hour, Boilermaker fans. Purdue's went over Wisconsin yesterday, and more. We'll do that. And, of course, Stephen Holder's going to join us at the 5 o'clock hour. Luke Bryan tickets also on the way. Don't go anywhere.
Tax day is coming.
with JMV.
If somebody gets in your face and calls you a I want you to be nice.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
And Mike DeCourcy podcast, 1075thefan.com. James over there, I'm John. Bobby Riddell's going to join us at the Boilermaker Radio Network. I was listening to both he and Rob, and I go, we have Rob on all the time. Rob is a longtime friend, and Rob Blackman, that is, the play-by-play voice. In fact, the first sports show that I ever did on the air was with Rob at Champions in the Weston, I believe. Remember Champions? Is it still there? Was it still called Champions? Champions in the Weston. And it was before, this goes way back, maybe 02, 03. It was before a preseason game with the Steelers and the Colts. That was Rob Blackman and I back in the day. But Rob's on the show all the time. Also, I'm going to get Bobby Buckets on the show. Bobby joins us coming up at the top of the hour. Stephen Holder in the 5 o'clock hour as well. Big week, and I'll tell you where we're going to be and who's going to be coming on here as the week goes along. Nick writes this, so Buddy is in that part of the slump where it's all in his head now. He needs the All-Star break like last week. And Nick, I would agree with that. I would agree. He just can't find it, and it looks like everything is absolutely short, and he is going about it the right way. He's trying to shoot himself out of it. But it's like he's just digging the hole deeper. I just wanted to tell you about what went down yesterday and how you looked at this so significantly as, oh, my goodness, look at the way he's talking to Carlisle, and he's mad, and he's chirping at the bench. Well, there's a reason why he was mad, because he's frustrated. But again, the bench and the players as a good team, you guys talk about this team, enjoying one another, having a great locker room. That is at the top of the list, being able to police your own. Hey, get back down the floor. So it was a bad pass. So you're in the shooting slump. Get back down there and play. You're not a great defensive player. Get back down there and play. We oftentimes skip it. You just see like the fun that's being had and the giggling and the laughing and all that. But you go through tough times too, and having a great locker room is even more essential during those times than it is for the times when things are going well for you. That was a moment that we saw in Charlotte last night. Quick break, and we come back. Bobby Buckets, Bobby Riddell of the Boilermaker Radio Network. We shall talk up Purdue, Wisconsin, Purdue later on this week, and the Boilers they're playing right now all together. Bobby Buckets joins us next.
In order for small businesses to thrive,
Live the fans.
The Ride with JMV.
It's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Holder's coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. Luke Bryan tickets. That annual summertime extravaganza, or at least concert season extravaganza. Your chance to win when you hear a Luke Bryan re-entry. More Pacers recap. I got that for you coming up here a little bit later on to the college basketball weekend. I don't know how much you want to get into the Pro Bowl. I didn't watch too much of that. But we got a lot on the plate for you. On the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, you can catch him along with our good friend Rob Blackman on the Boilermaker Radio Network. And called a fantastic game yesterday on the road in Madison, Wisconsin. The Boilers win over Wisconsin. And Bobby Riddell, the Bobby Buckets, aforementioned Bobby Buckets, joins us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Hey, Bobby, I will say this. I have called you Bobby Riddell instead of Bobby Riddell. I apologize for that, but remember, I'm from Southern Indiana, so that's kind of how that goes. I hope you're okay with that. So I've been corrected.
Hey, JMV.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean it's all good. I've gotten Rydell, I've gotten Riddell, I've gotten Riddle. I've got all that stuff growing up over the years. So yeah, Rydell works just fine. But yeah, technically it is Riddell, but. Yeah, happy to come on.
Well, you're going to be Buckets from here on out, right? Being a part of the show. So we're just going to go with Buckets right here. And I also want to give you a congratulations. So a little bit about a new member to the Buckets family here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind last week or so. My wife and I, we have 3 older boys, 9, 8, and 6. And then, a little age gap here. And then we just welcomed our first baby girl, Rose Riddell. So it's been exciting. She's 3-0. The Boilers are 3-0 since Rose has arrived. So she's done a nice job so far.
That's awesome right there, though. Well, congratulations. That's fantastic news, man. It really is.
Thank you.
Basketball lover, the entire family love basketball as much as you do?
There's definitely a strong basketball love in the Riddell family. As far as my kids go, definitely trying to grow that with them. My youngest son is definitely the most into it and is a pretty big fan. He knows a lot of the Big Ten rosters and is always asking about the different scores and stuff. So that's been fun to have him gain the interest in it.
Would you go to Harrison High School?
I did. Yep, Harrison High School.
When did you graduate?
So, yeah.
What year?
I graduated in 2005, and when I played, it was fun because we were back in I think it was the Hoosier Crossroads Conference.
Yeah.
And so we played against all those Indy schools, Zionsville, Hamilton Southeastern, Avon, Noblesville, all those fun Indianapolis schools to play against Brownsburg. I played against like Mark Titus, for example, at Brownsburg. And
you probably worked his ass over, didn't you? You worked him out.
I would like to think so, but I'd have to check the box score on that one. Don't quote me on that.
Well, I mean, normally his box score comes with a lot of zeros in it. So, yeah, I would assume you probably worked him.
That's right. Hopefully we were both avoiding the trillions back in high school, but
Well, before we get started on Purdue, I was going to ask you, have you ever played in a pickup game in and around Lafayette with Mark Barnheiser or Brooks or Braxton before? Ever been in a pickup game with them?
I haven't, but we actually, the neighborhood I live in is the same neighborhood that Brooks and Braxton grew up in. So I live very close to their dad. I believe their dad still lives in that same house.
He is the head coach of Lafayette, Mark Barnheiser, who has been a friend of mine since 1988. So, yes. And I just happen to think he's one of the better coaches I've ever been around on any level. So I've got and I love Braxton and Brooks, too. Brooks is having a fantastic career so far at Northwestern.
Man, it sure has been fun, right, to see Brooks and his development at Northwestern. It was really cool, of course, to have a guy that talented out of Lafayette. I'm always rooting for the Lafayette guys, of course, since I grew up there. And so it's been fun to really watch Brooks flourish at Northwestern this year as he's gotten increased opportunities starting every game. And, of course, I don't like when he's playing against our Boilers giving us fits, but outside of that, it's been really fun to watch him succeed.
He is Bobby Riddell, the Boilermaker Radio Network on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. What makes this team, you can start with Lance Jones, I'm sure, but what makes this team, this Boilermaker team, high-level elite good this year? They were high-level elite good last year, but what's different about this one so far that you've seen?
Sure. I mean, certainly the experience level of everyone, the additional year has really helped. I think a lot of people forget, as good as last year's team was, as far as power conference teams go, they were the 5th youngest team. So I think that was easily forgotten, of course, because Zach and how dominant he was and just how good those freshmen were right away and all the success we had early in the non-conference. But they were really a young team, and a lot of those guys were going through that stuff for the first time. But so I think that extra year has really helped all those guys that have come back. And then, you mentioned Lance Jones, of course. His addition has been so massive. I mean, the guy has really plugged a lot of those missing holes on this team as far as some of the skill sets we needed. I mean, it's crazy going into the Wisconsin game. Prior to the Wisconsin game, we had accomplished or achieved more fast break points already this season through 22 games than we had the previous season through the full 35-game season. We'd already accomplished more fast break points, and Lance was leading that charge at 78 fast break points. So clearly, just as far as like stealing easy buckets in transition, Lance has made a massive, addition there. And then his shot making, guy's not afraid of the moment. What I thought was really impressive about Wisconsin was pretty much every field goal attempt he made was a pretty difficult shot, whether it was a tough drive over a contested, shot blocker or a three or a pull-up jumper in somebody's face. I mean, he was really big time as far as hitting tough shots. And then I think Trey Kaufman-Renn, his ascension has helped. He's obviously been in the starting lineup all year. Him and Mason Gillis kind of tag team in that power forward spot. And, Trey was that backup center last year, kind of playing like 2 to 5 minutes a game backing up Zach, whereas now this year he's been able to get a lot more involved. And him and Mason have worked really well together, whether, when one guy's got it going, he'll play a little bit more, or if the other guy's got it going or kind of matchup based, those two have really been a nice duo there at that power forward spot.
Hey, Bobby, tell me somebody that you would really like to see get going right now. And not to suggest that they're playing badly, but just get going at a higher clip right now.
Well, I mean, there's one guy certainly that I think that he just doesn't get a lot of opportunity, of course, because his minutes are a little hit or miss as far as off the bench, and that's Camden Heide, the redshirt freshman. He's shooting the ball from three at a really nice percentage this year on pretty low volume. But, of course, his shot attempts are very hit or miss as far as because his minutes are up or down, and that's kind of the way that goes when you're that eighth man or so. But I do think the way he shoots the rock and his ability with his athleticism, his ability to guard on the other end, that's an area he's improving game by game with his size and athleticism. I think he's got a chance to be one of those really good 3-and-D two-way wings. And I think as the season goes along, as he continues to get more experience, there's going to be some opportunities where we might need him to even play more minutes, especially if teams are maybe really selling out on Zach, allowing, open kick-out threes. A guy who shoots a great percentage like he does, could get those opportunities, especially if he's able to defend on the other end. So I would love to see him continue to gain experience and maybe even have some games where he's able to get, some more shots and hopefully knock him down because, he is an exciting player with his athleticism.
So, buckets, Bobby Riddell from the Boilermaker Radio Networks on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. He was good at this a year ago, and he's even better at it, talking about the pick and slip, the pick and roll, whatever, with Zach Edey. And I'm talking about with Braden Smith passing it, right? I mean, his passes, and they're even better right now. I mean, it's high quality. But the thing that takes him next level is the consistency now we have seen with the 15 to 7-foot jump shots when defenses sag on him or sag down to Edey. How have you seen that mature from last year to this year with Braden Smith?
No, for sure. I mean, you're definitely seeing the maturation process with him and the confidence as far as now he's starting to see all these different ball screen coverages more and more and figuring out different ways to attack it. And I think none better as far as an example when you look at the last two games we played. Wisconsin, they play more of that drop coverage, kind of like we saw against Arizona with Omar Ballo. Braden was so good in that game coming off those screens. And with that drop coverage, just like against, Wisconsin, particularly in that first half, when they have that drop coverage, he's able to dribble into threes. And then a lot of times, like you said, that 15 to 17-foot jump shot where he's become super comfortable, whether that's going right or left, his ability to shoot off the bounce has been such a tough thing for opposing defenses to go against if they're going to play that drop coverage and try to take away Zach's dive. Because a lot of teams, if they get out there in high hedge, like we saw the previous game, Northwestern, they do it a little bit differently. They really get that big out there, high hedge, keep two guys on Braden Smith for an extended period of time, trying to make him give up the basketball. But then that makes, on the back end, you got a smaller guy having to take on that Zach Edey role, and you saw Braden Smith do a much better job this time handling that ball screen coverage than he did at Northwestern. He was really able to drag it out, keep the ball longer, and then Zach Edey was able to get a bunch of catch and dunk opportunities at the rim on those dives because of Braden's ability to kind of manipulate that ball screen coverage, and he ended up with a career-high 16 assists in that game. And so, yeah, his ability at that point guard position to not only facilitate but now score at a high level has made us, a very dangerous offensive team.
He is Bobby Riddell, the Boilermaker Radio Network, on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So Zach Edey, Player of the Week, Player of the Year a year ago, probably going to be Player of the Year again this year. Do we oftentimes we really don't mention enough the impact he has on the defensive end, do we?
No, we don't. I mean, Purdue's a top 20 defensive efficiency team per 10 palm, and I think the large reason for that is Zach Edey. Just his ability to protect the rim, just his sheer size, right? I mean, so many opponents don't even go in there or think about attempting a shot at the rim because they just see the mountain of a man that Zach Edey is down there, and it deters them. So many teams, when they play Purdue, end up shooting a bunch more floaters, contested pull-ups, even difficult threes, late shot clock, than a lot of other teams would who would, that they would against other teams where they might feel more comfortable attacking the rim. And so just his presence alone is huge, but I feel like he's made major strides this year, moving his feet on the perimeter, late shot clock stuff. We oftentimes will just switch it with Zach, and he's able to knock stuff out and really use his length and his improved foot speed on the perimeter to make things difficult. Guys will try to drive him, and he's able to recover and use his length and block those shots when they try to finish at the rim. So he's been unbelievable defensively because, we definitely are not the most elite perimeter defensive team. I did think we did a much better job at Wisconsin than we've done recently as far as defending the three-point line and making things difficult in the perimeter. But, yeah, Zach, he's an unbelievable defender and definitely does not get the credit on that end because he's just such a dominant offensive force.
Well, it does seem, too, like the opposing bigs, and Wall did it a couple of times. You saw it in the Northwestern game. They will test to see if they can get any contact, get a foul call. But most oftentimes, they just kind of run into a brick wall and have to kick it back out. And really, you get into the interior, into the paint, then, the 3-second violation comes into play as well. But it appears that oppositions with their bigs, not as big as Zach, they do try to test him at least at the outset of the game, it appears.
No, for sure. I mean, that's also one of the perks of Zach Edey is more often than not, if you have a player who's a really good interior player, Zach's size and stuff negates a lot of that effectiveness. And you will see from time to time certain, teams try to test him a little bit, but he's for the most part, Tyler Wall did a good job one time, getting Zach up off his feet a little bit and was able to get a foul on Zach. But for the most part, Zach's done such a good job of staying down and just utilizing his size to deter opponents from being able to finish. And he's so difficult to finish over even when he stays on his feet because he's so long and so big. But, Tyler Wall did have a little bit of success sometimes trying to gain some angles on him. But, Tyler Wall is one of the best in the business at finishing down around the basket with his quickness and getting angles. But for the most part, yeah, teams will try to test him early. Like you saw Omar Ballo for Arizona, really good big. He tried to score a couple times against Zach with his back to the basket, and it did not go well. And then obviously you saw Arizona go away from that for the most part. So that's definitely one of the big assets of Zach is teams that have good post play. They're often not thriving very often against Zach down low.
You've been around this team a lot, and Bobby Riddell, the Boilermaker Radio Network, is with us. And I was talking to Matt about this in the first time he was on the show this year. But how quickly did you see this team end up, losing any thought whatsoever about what took place in Columbus last March? I mean, I know that didn't have any effect on the beginning of the season. How quickly, in terms of working out in preparation for the season, did you see this group lose that thought and then concentrate and focus in on a new season this season and getting past that point?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, what happened last March, it's going to linger a little bit. There's no question until, the team is able to get to March this year and hopefully get that monkey off their back. But I think the ability for the team to have a foreign trip this summer was probably nice, just even though the competition didn't end up being great, just to, be able to go over there and play some games against other teams and just play some different teams that you hadn't had a chance to do since you had lost that game in March. That was probably nice to kind of turn the page a little bit. And then, I'm sure they obviously in practice just saw Lance Jones and how good he was and how much he was going to help and just the improvement of all the players coming back. Kirchhoff and Wren had a huge summer. I think they probably also just internally were like, all right, we're a better, more experienced team. We're determined. And, we're going to go into this season, guns blazing kind of thing and ready to make amends for last year. So this team obviously has been playing really well this year and clearly is looking to make a deep run this March.
So Bobby Riddell, Bobby Buckets. You can hear him on the Boilermaker Radio Network. By the way, too, I had Matt on the show back on Thursday, and I mentioned when you and Rob were talking about what the Boilers were doing against Boo Buie, and you referenced the zone. He explained it in its entirety, but it was because of your reference of kind of a zone that perked my ears up and attention, so I passed it along to him last week. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting thing that Purdue tried, at Northwestern. Northwestern kept doing a like-sized ball screen where they would bring up like Fletcher Lawyer or Braden Smith's man and set a ball screen on Boo Buie to get that switch because Purdue will switch like-sized ball screens, and they were trying to get Lance Jones off of Boo. And you see this in the NBA all the time where, like, they'll bring up a guy's man who they think is a poor defender to try to get the switch. Well, Northwestern was just doing that same thing, and they were letting Boo try to attack advantageous matchups. And we, in this particular game, we're trying to figure out, okay, what can we maybe do to try to dissuade those Boo Buie one-on-one isolation opportunities against those advantageous matchups. And so we decided, hey, what if we throw, a little bit of a zone at them where basically we're just going to try to show a bunch of bodies in a zone-like format and hope Boo gets the ball, basically just hoping that's going to get the ball out of Boo's hands. He'll move it, and then they were going to try to match up and get back into man-to-man. And they unfortunately just had a little bit of issues matching up once Boo got rid of it. Obviously, it wasn't something they had a whole lot of time to practice, but I think it only ended up being like 3 possessions or so, and of course Northwestern stuck 2 threes in 2 of those 3 possessions. So I'm sure Coach Painter didn't love that little experiment on how it went, but the idea was certainly to not let Boo Buie just thrive in one-on-one opportunities.
It's Bobby Riddell, the Boilermaker Radio Network, known as Buckets on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Again, congratulations on the family edition, man. We'll do this again as much as you want to come on. I go back a long way with Rob, and it's good to have you on. I really enjoy listening to your broadcast and your game play-by-play and analyst work. Well done.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, Rob's the best. He's been super fun to work with. His first year on the broadcast was my freshman year as a player. So it's been really fun to be able to work with a guy who I've known for a long time and have a really good pre-existing relationship with. And, he's made it seamless for me coming onto the broadcast team.
Is he?
Gosh, this is our 4th year now. So.
Yeah. Is he North White's finest? Is that how you would describe him? North White's finest?
I think you're right. He's got North White's finest. Probably one of the star alums of North White, you would think. So, yeah, the voice of the Boilers.
Man, I appreciate that. Again, congratulations on the addition to the family. We'll do it again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, JMV. Appreciate you having me.
It's Bobby Riddell, the Boilermaker Radio Network. He's called Bobby Buckets. So he played at Harrison. So you get Hamilton Southeastern, Zionsville, Noblesville. Yeah, he was up and around here back then. Now, that's good. First time on the show. Bobby Buckets. So we're Shams talking about the Pacers having interest in a particular player that you would know. I'll bring that up coming up on the other side. If you missed out on this, the 3-point contest at All-Star Weekend it is set. Lauri Markkanen of Utah, Jalen Brunson of the Knicks, Malik Beasley, and Damian Lillard of Milwaukee, and Tyrese Haliburton of the Pacers. That would be the three. And the significant news of Joel Embiid. They're talking about hoping to get him back during the postseason. That is a long time to ride without your best and, frankly, the NBA's best when he's out there. That is incredible news right there. Lateral meniscus surgery. And they say an extended period of time. What did I read? What's Doc Rivers? Is he 0-3 as the Bucks head coach?
I think he just got his first win.
1-3 now. So he's going to be the all-star coach. Hey, JMV, the NBA unveiled it's going to be what exactly kind of court? Not much online. Well, for the skills, the celebrity game, and other things, they're going to be playing on a glass court at Lucas Oil Stadium. Have you seen the video of the glass court over there, James?
I have not, no.
How in the hell do you play on a glass court? I know. I grew up and I lived on a dirt floor, right. But how do you play on a glass court? How do you not slide around? Anybody out there ever played on a glass court? I played, obviously, on hardwood. On rubber. Anybody ever play at a church where the basketball floor, or the court, if you will, was carpet? Anybody? I'm serious. Anybody out there ever play on a carpet court? I have played on tile, which is terrible. What do they have at, anybody go to New Hope, the church down there? I haven't played there in a long time. Their gym is like some kind of plastic. It's like Lego put together. There's some other things besides rubber, some other kind of courts like that. But I basically, some of these courts are made so it's not just for basketball practice. When you have everybody else messing around in there and they're scuffing up that court, that makes sure that the main court that you have is maintaining the freshness and not the dirt and the marks and all that crap. See, I went to a high school where, like, everybody, it was one gym, right? We had one gym, so everybody participated in that one gym. It wasn't just about basketball. You had PE in there, and some of those that I went to school with didn't have, like, tennis shoes or basketball shoes or running shoes. They had boots. So you had cowboy boots and regular boots being utilized in there. I was mortified at the age of 7 when they played donkey basketball in the Eastern Gymnasium with nothing down, donkeys, and I believe Billy Keller was actually on the back of a donkey at this game. The donkeys would just scuff up the gym floor, hardwood gym floor, and would just take dumps. Just, hey, I'm going to dump right here at the half-court line. Let me get down here in the post. I'm going to go ahead and take a dump here on the low block. And see, even at 7, I was mortified by that. I go, wait a minute. Can you not do this, like, outside somewhere? Why's this got to be in here? I know it's for charity, and that's great. Why's it got to be in here? And I cannot be, even in my high level of hillbilliness, I could not be the only one that had a school or attended a school that ever hosted a donkey basketball game. Running around out there. I swear Billy Keller was on the back of a donkey. Swear. At 7. I was 7. And just in shock. See, I mean, when you're growing up and you're young, when you see animals, for lack of a better description, break one off, it normally is something that is giggle-worthy, right? We all giggle. I still do to this day, but that wasn't giggle-worthy. Well, man, that's where we play basketball. It's brutal. John Buzzard said, I have both voted in and played. Voted in and played on a carpeted. Here's what's funny. You played on a carpeted gym. So they used to have dances in the gym too. And I got mad. Seriously, I was already way too old. But it was because how much I love basketball. I'd get mad when they would host dances in the gym and you would get everybody in their dress shoes and boots and they're dancing around with not everything covered up. It just damaged the floor. I got pissed out of that. I was 13. Carpeted gym floors. This one's glass, right, James? Glass at Lucas Oil Stadium?
Yeah, I
for the
think
skills
so.
competition. You think Larry Bird would look like shooting threes and dominating a three-point shootout on a glass floor? I think Larry Bird would just go, all right, what is with this glass floor stuff? It's funny. I was having a conversation. I won't get lengthy on this before the break. Having a conversation about, Larry Bird and, the winning time on HBO with the Lakers. That was so good for a couple of seasons and then unfortunately was cut loose. They're not doing anymore. I absolutely loved it. John C. Reilly as Jerry Buss. But some of the better moments in that were the Larry Bird moments. And I know that everything was over-exaggerated, but the scoring at will in a pickup game at Indiana State against actual Indiana State players while wearing jeans was not exaggerated. That was real. I don't think he was wearing boots, but he was wearing jeans, and he was working everybody. All right, quick break. We'll come back. I got your calls on the other side. Luke Bryan tickets coming up here, too. Stephen Holder, top of the hour. Busy week. I tell you when, where, and why, and who will all be on the show coming up. 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
Imagine a world where your child not only learns
It should be more natural, brother. It should flow out like this. Look, man, I ain't falling for no banana in my tailpipe.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Inside the AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live, thank you all for joining us. I appreciate you guys, per usual, right? I'm on the other side of the microphone right here, if you're looking. I don't know if this is my best side right here. It's certainly one of my sides. Speaking of sides, Greg writes this: the best carpeted gym floors are the ones that also serve as the cafeteria. Absolutely disgusting. The carpeted gym floor, the glass floor for the skills competitions and other things going on during the NBA All-Star Weekend at Lucas Oil Stadium. The glass floor. That's outstanding. Now, it's for the LED lights, I believe. JMV, the Warren, Indiana Gym in Huntington, Indiana hosted an annual donkey basketball game for a fundraiser. Both of my parents participated in the 70s. Home of the Lightning Five. Probably the coolest name for a high school basketball team ever. That's well done. That is well done. Donkey basketball. Yeah, Donovan Mitchell, by the way, has been added. I gave you that list from Shams for the three-point competition. I think Donovan Mitchell of the Cavaliers also has been added to that. So take it for what it's worth. Bobby Riddell of the Boilermaker Radio Network a little bit earlier talked about Purdue's big win yesterday. That, of course, on the road in Madison, Wisconsin. Big one next up for Purdue, IU on Saturday in West Lafayette. IU's Peacock tomorrow night. IU has been peacocked at 7 o'clock. I'm assuming that will give a lot of you IU fans a significant out not to watch it. Peacocked at 7 o'clock at Ohio State. That actually sounded pretty good. Peacocked at 7 o'clock. A lot of you can just say, you know what? It's on Peacock. That'd become an excuse. Hey, IU's on tonight. Yeah, but it's on Peacock. Hey, JMV, I heard you mention the Grammys. I did not watch it last night, but I certainly saw all over the internet the performance of Fast Car. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then still, like, we live in a world where people found crap to say about it. It's our world, I guess. I'm not going to direct you to it any longer. Hey, Indiana State, a big win over Drake on Saturday, so shout out to the Sycamores. Not in the top 25 just yet. In terms of the top 25, if Indiana State is in Terre Haute, which it is, they would be right now the basketball team. They would be in Riley. So, or if you're coming northbound on 41, Farmersburg. They would be in Farmersburg. That is the equivalent. Indiana State in Terre Haute, number 28 overall, 53 votes. So in comparison to the top 25, Indiana State's basketball team to that of Terre Haute would be in Farmersburg right now. Not too far off. That's where Channel 2 is. WTWO. Brian's at 239-1070 to start out the day. Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, the Barnheiser you talk about, is that the Barnheiser from LaPel, Indiana?
It is.
Okay. Well, I'm from Anderson, and he's a couple of years older. I remember him having to go against the city teams. Man, he was a great shooter.
He was a bad dude, and he shot it from anywhere and everywhere at any time at a high volume. Yes.
Yeah, that was back in the day when you had the three city schools in Anderson and then LaPel and I think Elwood. Those smaller schools would have to compete, but man, there was some great basketball back then.
Yeah,
outstanding. Alexandria.
Yep.
I don't know if you ever heard of Dally Hunter, the guy that coached at Alexandria. When they won the 2A, and I talked to him, and I said, what do you think about class basketball? He said it's good for the kids, but he said I'd much rather win an Anderson basketball sectional.
Yeah, and that's how. And thank you for the call too. I appreciate it. Mark Barnheiser is from LaPel. He's the head coach at Lafayette Jeff, and that's exactly how it used to be. But that has not certainly long since now been the thought. But that's how it once was, no question. Thank you, Brian, for the call. I mentioned this before the break. According to Shams, the Mavericks and the Pacers have expressed interest in Andrew Wiggins. Yeah, Andrew Wiggins, of course, of the Golden State Warriors. I'm going to see what he has left contractually. I know it's a crap ton of money. And if you've watched them play this year for a disappointing Golden State team, which I believe is going to be in here on Thursday, see if we can't get Trace on the show tomorrow. But on this Golden State team that obviously always has, and you got to keep in mind, too, they always have these championship aspirations. Bob Myers, the GM, left. Mike Dunleavy Jr. took over. And they're about ready to go ahead and revamp basically everything but Steph Curry. Andrew Wiggins, just a little over 12 a game. I'll be honest with you. The Wiggins, the last time Golden State won it, I thought was fantastic. This version of Wiggins is not one that gets me excited whatsoever. I know everybody gets all excited. The sports arousal comes with any sort of trade interest. When it says expressing interest, I know a lot of people out there pop a pup tent, sports-wise. This is not one that does much for me. And given the fact they're at Golden State, you've seen them play just about every night. And it's been nothing to write home about. So that, however, is the latest. The Mavericks and the Pacers. I just don't know what he has on his contract right now and what you'd have to deal with. I'm still going to say they don't do anything. And again, as I said at the outset of the show, I know everybody can be mad at Buddy, and Buddy's not shooting it well. I get that. But Buddy is a good enough shooter, I think, to deserve respect that at some point that is going to come back. He's not a bad shooter, or at least what these past handful of games would dictate. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, if I were you, I wouldn't jack with the offense. Like, the offense hasn't been as good as it has been, and I know it's not going to be at a $125 a game clip. I'd just be careful with messing with the offense. And I have a pretty good track record. I told you to be careful about T.J. McConnell. You're glad I told you that. I told you about being careful with Daniel Tice, and there have been like 5 or 6 times when you kind of wish that they would have thought that thing through a different angle. However, he wanted it out, so he wanted it out before anything else. I just think there are a lot of things that you haven't seen about this group that you need to see a little bit more. And you know what? Maybe it ends up being underwhelming, considering what we thought prior to the deal for Siakam. I just think you have to see a little bit more. There just hasn't been nearly enough. And then Chad Buchanan on the show last week, Pacers general manager, referenced the fact that they did that big deal already. Didn't sound like to me that they were thinking about doing anything else. Andrew's up next at 239-1070. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey, JMV.
Hello,
hey,
Andrew.
I heard you talking. I jumped in the car after work, and you started talking about carpet on the gym floor.
Yes.
And I attended St. Lawrence Elementary at 46 and Shadeland, and in my entire time at St. Lawrence, we had a carpeted gym floor. It was kind of like a golden, tannish brown, gym floor. But it was that was the first day I was like, I had to call in, at least say something about it, because I know if there was anybody from St. Lawrence listening out there, they were like, yeah, we had that in the middle of the 90s. But it was, it was good for rug burns, especially if you got on the floor. But we always, we we referred to it as Carpet Square Arena.
That's awesome, man. Carpet
students at
Square
St. Lawrence.
Arena. Well done.
It was Carpet Square Arena. So anyway, that's all I had for you. But I had to give a shout out to St. Lawrence for their carpet floor back in the day.
See, I don't like carpet floors now. I didn't like it back then. I understand why they tried to make it, multi-useful. It's not just for playing basketball on, I'm sure, for other events. But man, it was a bummer. Whenever you walked into a gym that did not have hardwood, for me, it's always been a bummer.
Yeah, and it's just something that, I started going there when I was in first grade, so I didn't really know any different. But as you got older, other teams would say stuff about it when they came in, and you'd see their faces, and then as you got older, most of them had been there before, but I think they just kind of got used to it. But, one thing I really liked about it is that you never slipped on it. It was, and the ball did bounce pretty similar. I know it sounds weird, but I did like the fact that the traction was really good on it, but that's just me. And like I said, I'm kind of partial to it anyway because, I played so many years on that floor. But anyway.
Yep. Hey, thank you for the call.
Yep.
Appreciate that, Andrew. The carpeted gym. Yeah, truth be told, if I walked into a gym and it didn't have hardwood, I'm just immediately bummed out. Some certainly are better than others. Multi-use, I get it. I'm probably going to hear from an administrator. Well, we have to have that for multi-use. We use it as a cafeteria. We use it for plays. We use it for family get-togethers. We use it for graduation. It's not just about basketball, JMV. Well, this is a sports show, and this is about basketball. Mr. Administrator. And a lot of those people I like. Some of those I don't. Just reinvent the wheel. Let's be the ones that don't take the cash, though. How about that? Don't take the cash. 19 committees and taking the cash. Don't do that. And if that's cash, put the cash into a hardwood floor. I mentioned with the Pacers yesterday, 99 points. And listen, it is on paper in the box score a great defensive effort. But Charlotte has about 99 points worth of offense right now. That makes sense. If you watched that game last night, the 10-win Charlotte Hornets, that makes sense. Pascal Siakam had 25 points, 9 assists, 8 rebounds. Aaron Nesmith, 22. Miles, 16 and 10. Tyrese Haliburton, 20 minutes of play. I was kind of curious as to whether or not he was going to be reinserted. I was kind of interested if they would. They were gonna. I'm just glad they didn't have to. I really want to see these guys get some rest. We know about the Haliburton situation, but I mentioned this too on Friday, and then he did not end up playing. Miles hadn't looked right, I don't think. And hell, I think I would know, considering how much I have to watch, and how much it's magnified. You guys are on me like minute-by-minute status. He just hadn't looked right. And I'll be honest with you, he hadn't looked right since the Embiid game, to me. You need some rest or something. 16 points and 10 rebounds for 33. And Jalen Smith had 10. I think Benedict Mathurin, 14 off the bench. And the Pacers doing last night, exactly what was necessary to have been done. You know what? I think I remember that. JMV, the UD Arena in Dayton, Ohio, had a poured floor, basically rubber, until the mid-90s. I do remember that. Thank you. JMV, I know how you're a big fan of all Pizza King locations. Give a big-time sky point to Wendell Swartz. He founded Pizza King and the Pizza King chains here in Indiana, died at the age of 98. And obviously over the past, what would you guys say, 15 or so years, the Pizza King brand has reemerged even more so. But it goes back forever. Wendell Schwartz, Sky Point, the businessman who founded the very popular Indiana chain known as Pizza King. That is one of my favorites, too. Right there with it. Right at the top of the list. All right, quick break. We'll come back. Stephen Holder, top of the hour. Did you get that email that I sent you to? Oh, we'll find out more about that. Maybe somebody else coming on. Get you a little insight on the other side, too. Bobby Riddell, Boilermaker Radio Network, and we also talked to Mike DeCourcy a little bit earlier, I should say, Sporting News and the Big Ten Network about a variety of things. Don't go anywhere. Luke Bryan tickets coming at you as well in just a little bit. All week long, we'll be giving away a pair of tickets each day for that show right here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Back in my day.
with JMV.
He's my best friend. He's my pal. He's my homeboy, my rotten soldier. He's my sweet cheese, my good time boy.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Stephen Holder, top of the hour. Bobby Riddell, the Boilermaker Radio Network. Bobby Buckets, first time on the show. Mike DeCourcy a little bit earlier, too. Podcast 1075thefan.com. So, Gutshot sent me this. I'm guessing you were already watching Skinamax, but did you catch any of the Butler win at Creighton? That was so impressive. That was so enjoyable to watch, Gutshot, that occupied first segment status because of that win, along with Purdue and Indiana State, got first segment status. If you lose, you don't get first. Well, sometimes you do if you're getting ripped. The thing about Indiana, though, I mean, everybody, you got to be tougher. You just get all this stuff that just drives you nuts. Just does. There's so many things just beyond being tough. Got to be tough. So many things that need to be done with that, and they're so far away. And I kind of view it like this. I view it like with Chris Ballard, when we knew that he got extended and he was going to be back, and we all, like me, questioned, well, this has been the resume so far. And so how many more years do you have? You know, you're going into year 7, going to be going into year 8. But at that point in time, when Jim Irsay put all his confidence in him, then talking about getting rid of him was gone. And it's the same with Mike Woodson. He's not going to go anywhere this year. Now, that's going to put more heat, more pressure on him to turn this thing around coming up next year. But honestly, I mean, it already should be on, because on Saturday, that's just not a product that should be offered up on a Saturday hosting Penn State and Bloomington. That was an embarrassment. But he's not going to go anywhere no matter how much you shake your fist. And I know a lot of people suggest that he does need to go someplace. I mean, hell, I get it all the time. I mean, Dusty May's a friend of mine. And everybody thinks, well, can you go ahead and do – I can't do anything. You know, whether it's Dusty or Josh Schertz at Indiana State or Bruce Pearl, or all these names are mentioned. But, I mean, you just end up going through the ringer, but full well knowing that Woodson's not going to go anyplace. Unless this thing falls apart stratospherically, he's not going to go anyplace at the end of this year. But no, Butler got first segment status all the way. That was as tough a game, shot it superbly in the second half, and then had to endure a struggle with getting the ball in bounds. Late free throw making, late shot making, defensive stop. Yeah, Davis getting cut in the eye. That was that. What's his name? Kalkbrenner. Just got him right in the eyeball, cut him open. Kapke coming in, knocking down a couple of free throws. It's just impressive stuff. So yeah, that was Gutshot first segment status right there, because oftentimes we utilize that for the winners. Quick break. We shall return. Stephen Holder on the other side. Luke Bryan tickets also coming up. Do not go anywhere. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
All right, guys, let's talk about your window situation.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
I did not watch the Grammys last night, but I did see a couple of different replays on social media of Tracy Chapman and Luke Combs. That was pretty cool. I don't think I had seen Tracy Chapman perform in, hell, I don't know how many years. Now, I believe this to be the case. Fast Car, huge song, 1988? And then did Tracy Chapman not have a song that was huge in the 90s called Give Me One Reason? But last night was pretty good. Or I should say that performance last night was pretty good. I did not watch it. Alexander writes this: what's the highest seed you think the Fighting Trees can get in the tournament? Here's my thought, Alexander, and I hate to be this way, and maybe I'm completely underselling them. I just think to be 100% safe, coming from a mid-major conference, Missouri Valley, and knowing how tightly packed, honestly, Indiana State, Bradley, and Drake might be, I'm not going to consider really much until they win that tournament. I can't. Can you imagine the massive disappointment it would be if it does come down to a decision and then, again, the committee? You know how I feel about committees. There's not a good one out there. Well, there's one good one. But really, that's not even good. I hate committees. Committees are there to screw stuff up even more. So I wouldn't leave it up to the committee. Yeah, in this case, I think you just got to punch it for yourself. I will say this, Alexander. This has been so much fun, and I equated it to how I felt last year from my friend Dusty May when they started about this time, or maybe at the end of January a year ago. We started having him on the show, and they started that run that ended in the Final Four. It was incredible. It's got the feeling. I don't know if it's because I'm again close to it. You know, like I was Dusty in Florida Atlantic, like I am now with my alma mater, Indiana State, but it has some similar feelings. And you just don't want to see it end. I love what it's doing for the school, certainly for the basketball program. But for Terre Haute, too, that was just a jack beyond belief and hype joint on Saturday night. Great to see. Yeah, I mean, even the committee, you guys know that I'm talking about. I don't know how great that one is. It's funny. Great, I don't know. Not so sure. Andy Moore, Automotive Group Hotline, ESPN, ESPN.com. He has been staked out in Central Florida for a number of days, involved in the Pro Bowl festivities. Stephen Holder joins us. So how was your time in Central Florida?
Oh, man, it was glorious, man. I mean, what? I would say the average temperature, I'm a big weather guy. Average temperature during the week was probably 68, and sunny. So I was loving life, man. Yeah, it was good. I guess I started a firestorm unintentionally with Stefon Diggs while I was at it. So
well, wait a minute. I'm unaware of the firestorm. I apologize. I've had my head in the sand. My head's been in Terre Haute over the weekend. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm exaggerating a little bit, but look. Okay, I know this doesn't have anything to do with our show here, but just for the background. So Stefon Diggs, there's been a lot going on with Buffalo this year, right? Offense coordinator fired. He drops the big pass in the playoff game on that big deep throw from Josh Allen. You know, they lose to the Chiefs, frustrating, et cetera. He hasn't really talked. He didn't talk to the media, I don't think, for the last couple of weeks, and did not talk after the game or when they cleaned out their lockers. So no one's heard from him. And there's always like a little bit of smoke with him. Like, is he happy? What's going on there? And I asked him, I said, hey, a lot happened in Buffalo this year. Are you optimistic about the future, et cetera, et cetera? And gave these like really cryptic answers along the lines of, well, I can't tell the future, man. We'll see. And I said, okay, well, but you're ready to roll, right? You're like, you're good to go with the Bills and all that. And he's like, yeah, well, I'll be ready to roll no matter what happens. I'm like, well, what? What do you mean, man? So anyway, that's the abbreviated version. So I write the story, and oh boy, I was a villain in Western New York. Oh, you're trying to start stuff. Actually, I gave this guy every opportunity to like not make this a big deal, and he bent over backwards to say what he had to say. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He's 30 years old, I bet. So it wasn't my fault, man, if anybody's wondering.
So with Stefon Diggs, is he at that point now to where the problems that can occur around him are certainly a lot more than the production that he can get you game by game, and the place ultimately he can help a team get to once they get into the postseason? Does one side outweigh the other right now?
That's a great question, but there is a reality in this game, right? Where, are you worth the trouble? Now, he's not causing a problem here. Let me be clear. Like, I don't think this is a big deal, but at some point, right, you just kind of want some calm waters. You don't want to have to deal with, is he happy? Is he not happy? Those kinds of things. I would say that becomes a fair question the older a player gets. Stefon, I think, is 30 years old now. His production maybe wasn't as impressive this year. And I know that their general manager in Buffalo at the end of the season, he was asked about him, and his defense of Stefon Diggs was that, hey, I still think he's a number one receiver. And it's funny, like that would not have even needed to be said 2 years ago, right? So that I thought was kind of interesting. I'm not saying that I believe differently. I just think it's notable that even his own general manager thought that needed to be said.
However, I would still take 107 catches and nearly 1,200 yards and 8 TDs. Yeah. I would take it right here in a half a second, right now.
Yeah,
I would.
Yeah, I think by some measures his numbers were down. Overall, still pretty good numbers. I just think it's relative to like what he's done in the past, right? But no, you're not kidding. I mean, the guy is still a highly productive player. Let's be honest. There's probably a very, very, very overwhelming chance he's back in Buffalo next year, and this conversation won't matter. But there is at least some question mark as to whether he's all in. I mean, he could easily have said, I'm all in, and I love it in Buffalo, and there's really nothing to talk about. And I would have gone off with my tail between my legs. He didn't say that. So that was interesting.
So Stephen Holder of ESPN on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So that kind of is about the question I'm going to ask. This time of year, or maybe after the Super Bowl, we start to see some of these wide receivers, right? These guys kind of shake loose from remaining with their team, things we would not think, right? I mean, we know some of these guys beforehand, like, you knew T. Higgins, for example, is going into free agency, guys like that may have availability if their teams don't bring them back. But any disgruntledness, like we thought maybe Justin Jefferson would have that in Minnesota? I'm talking about among the elite level receivers. Any disgruntledness out there that maybe a certain Indy area team might be able to take advantage of? Because I have my fingers crossed. I do.
I hear that. I think it's probably a little early to know. We'll see. I think who are the guys, I guess, that are looking for new deals? I guess that's how you'll know, I don't know of any situations that are brewing, but I also think a lot of times these things sneak up on you. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. There are a lot of times we don't know what's happening behind the scenes until we know. You know what I'm saying? And then suddenly some things get leaked and there starts to be a little buzz, and then next thing you know, someone's on the trading block. I mean, the Russell Wilson situation, not the more recent situation, but when he was traded from Seattle. There was a little bit of that there, right? I don't think, if I recall correctly, I don't remember thinking, oh, he's absolutely getting traded this offseason. I think there was like some undertones, something might be going on there. And then it went from that to, oh, wait, this is happening. So that happens sometimes, and I just think it really boils down to, whether there's motivation on either side to get to find a solution to a problem. But I don't know. I still think the likely scenario here is that Michael Pittman's their number one receiver next season, and they move forward there. But if you're talking about an outside addition, now keep in mind, especially if you're talking about a trade situation, those guys in those situations often want to get paid too. So you're going to have to pay twice. It's like the DeForest Buckner trade. You got to give the pick or picks, and you got to give the contract. So that gets dicey. I think it can work in certain situations. I thought the DeForest Buckner situation, that's one where it's hard to argue that was a bad acquisition, but it's not always the right move. So I don't know. I know we're talking super hypothetical here.
Sure.
But I don't know. I guess it would have to be taken on a case-by-case basis based on who we're talking about.
You brought up Stefon Diggs, and Stephen Holder, by the way, joins us. There was some A.J. Brown conversation about his level of happiness in Philadelphia as well. And I guess the reason why I bring this up is to quench the thirst that a lot of people, including myself, would have around here. That is basically the only way you're going to see a wide receiver that we all would love to see around here. If somebody is disgruntled and it just kind of, falls in your lap, or you're motivated to see it fall in your lap, because really all other ways, unless you're just simply going to draft somebody in the first round, that's going to be it. That's going to be your avenue.
I think that's fair. I do think that, most of these guys we're talking about were drafted pretty high. So that's still the best way to do it, but you'd have to actually draft a receiver in the first round to make that happen. So, right. In Chris Ballard's history, I don't think there's a whole lot of that. So maybe that's not going to be the case. But that's still the best way to do it. Going this route, where you have to, somebody falls out of the trees, they fall out of the trees, but they're not cheap either. So you've got to, as I said, you got to pay twice. I don't know. A.J. Brown, I think everything in Philadelphia, nothing in Philadelphia is ever certain. And I guess what I mean by that is, they're not afraid to make big moves one way or the other. They traded for him. I could see a scenario where if the situation was right, they'd trade him away. Now, I don't know anything about what's happening there, but all I'm saying is Philadelphia, we know this from the Carson Wentz trade. So I'm just talking in generalities here. Let me be clear. But what we know about the Eagles is that if they think a move makes sense, they will pull the trigger. That is what they do. And they have not been hesitant to do that, whether it's coming or going. So, sure, who knows?
You think Nick Sirianni's an interesting story. You think the resurfacing, if you will, of those assistants around him, was that a necessity for him, you think, to end up keeping that gig? Is that how tight that may have been with Philly, even after being in the Super Bowl a year ago, but having this tremendous letdown at the end of this year? Was that kind of one of the gives and takes here of him remaining as the head coach?
It's not necessarily, but I would say this. I do think that at minimum, he's on a very hot seat next year. So you've got to set yourself up for success in 2024. Because what just happened can't happen again. That is very clear. It cannot happen again. Things are hot down there, up there, because, for example, I tried to talk to Jalen Hurts this week. Lots of people wanted to talk to Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was very clear. I ain't talking, because he knows there's a pretty volatile situation there, and he knows anything he says is going to be a headline, and things are really dicey there, right? And there's a lot of pressure on everybody in that situation, the quarterback, the coach, everybody. So to your question, standing in place and standing pat was not an option. Whether his neck was on the line right now, which I don't know to be the case, or whether we're talking about him being on a hot seat next year, you have to set things in motion now to have success later on. That offensive coordinator situation was not sustainable. It absolutely wasn't. And they had to do what they had to do. We'll see. I would say this. If it doesn't work well, it doesn't work out for him next season, it's going to be on Nick. There's no doubt about it. And I like Nick a lot, but it's going to be on him. There's no doubt about it. They're not going to abide 2 years in a row with very subpar results in that town.
Yeah, well, it's that too, and then his personality, man. When you're going, everybody's on board with it, but when you're not, everybody's going to pick you apart because of that. So that plays a significant role too.
It's a great point, and I think I've said this to you before. Nick is the perfect coach, or was the perfect coach for where they were the year before. You know, in fact, even 2 years ago when they were, I think, the wild card team, his first year, he was actually a good fit because that team had some veterans. They had a lot of talent. It was just a matter of like Jalen Hurts was still growing into that role and it needed time. But once they really got rolling the next year, I mean, they had swagger, and that was a perfect fit for Sirianni. But I agree, not every coach is good for every situation. I don't think there's some kind of rebuilding team, so I don't think that, he's necessarily a bad fit, Sirianni. But if the results don't come, his approach is not exactly, perhaps, not the exact right approach. Just because that's just how it works. It's like Frank Reich. I felt like Frank Reich was the perfect coach when he was the perfect coach, and then over time, situation changed, and maybe his personality wasn't the right personality for what they needed at that time. And as situations evolve, coaches' approaches have to evolve. So we'll see if Nick can do that, if necessary.
He is Stephen Holder of ESPN. He's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So you think wide receiver could be considering the coach, considering the quarterback who's going through another rookie season reboot, is wide receiver that first-round choice, or do they have more, you think, once we get there, coming up at the end of March, or should say at the end of April here, they have other priorities that you think of need that they would go round number one, or is this the year they do go wide receiver there?
I would hope, this may not be a popular answer or one that people want to hear, but I really do hope and think they should take the approach of do what makes sense. And really what I'm saying is best player available to a degree, right? I mean, I'm not saying take a left guard if he's the best player, but within reason, best player available. And here's why. Because while I do think they could use another weapon, I don't necessarily think it has to be in the first round. I mean, the Josh Downs example last year, I think, is a good one. Now, I'm not saying you get another guy of that profile, but my point is if you do your due diligence, there's no reason you can't come away with a good prospect in the second round. Really what I think they need there is, I mean, if Michael Pittman's going to be their number one receiver, and that may be, I think that is still workable. What I think you need is a really good Batman. If he's going to be, a really good Robin. If Michael Pittman is going to be your Batman, then the Robin has to be like a dude, like kind of on the same level, frankly. But I think if you don't have Tyreek Hill, if you don't have, that super elite guy who is clearly head and shoulders above everybody else, then what if you had, two guys of the next tier? You know what I'm saying? And I think Michael Pittman's down whatever tier that is after that. So if you had two of those, that's workable. So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is you can find that. I mean, Michael Pittman was a second-round pick, so you can find that late first round, second round. It's possible. T. Higgins, for example, second-round pick. Like those guys are out there. And I don't know how deep that position is going to be this year, but it does sound like there are some options. So I really do think this team is in a place where they have, I don't want to use the word luxury, but they're in a position where they just need talent. Just keep building talent all around. and they're going to be okay. I really do believe that. I do think they should address wide receiver. I just don't think you have to do it in the first round if you re-sign Michael Pittman.
So coming off his rookie season, this team was incredibly excited about number 80. And then Jelani Woods didn't play a moment this particular year. Where is the level of interest and thought and what they believe Jelani Woods could give them this offseason compared to how they thought about him last offseason?
That was one of the most disappointing situations, I thought, with the entire roster this year, just because of where the hope was in terms of what he could be, because they had very high hopes for him. I think they were justified, too. It didn't work out. And we didn't know what was going on because Shane Steichen is just, he's so forthcoming with injury information, as you know. But
tells you everything, right? Everything you need to know.
Exactly. I admit to feeling a little bit guilty about how I viewed that situation, because I just wondered, all right, is this kid soft or what's going on with him? As it turns out, there wasn't really a handle on his injury, and there wasn't really a realization of what was going on with him physiologically. He had sort of a muscular imbalance that they had to work on, and he's got to get a certain type of rehab to address this. It can be done. It's just they weren't doing it because there wasn't an understanding of what was wrong with him. So now that they've got a handle on it, there's a good chance he's going to be just fine and they can get him back on track. But that realization didn't come until too late in the season, and he ended up re-injuring it as he was getting close to coming back. So I guess what I'm saying is if they get him right, there's no reason he can't pick up where he left off. Look, he didn't tear his ACL. He didn't have some kind of career-threatening injury. He should be okay as long as they address this and manage it and just prevent him from having these recurring hamstring issues. He should be fine. And if that turns out to be the case, I don't see any reason for any lower level of optimism of what he can be. He still has to do it. He has to prove it. He has to be consistent. But the flashes are the flashes. We saw them. And I think particularly with a quarterback like Anthony Richardson, who will give him some shots down the field, I think that's a good mix, those two guys. That's a good combination. And I feel pretty bullish about Jelani Woods.
So in closing here regarding Jelani Woods, I was told that it was the lack of offseason preparation, to put it lightly. Others have told me that's inaccurate. It was because he worked on his body, and it was about preparing for that second season for him that ended up he acquired, obviously, that injury. What was it? What have you heard it was?
I have not heard that it was the former in terms of a lack of preparation. I don't know that to be the case. I do think that some of this was beyond his control, and there was just, like I said, just a lack of understanding about what was going on with him. It's kind of I don't want to say it's an anomaly. It's very hard to explain. He did a good job of explaining it, but I'm stupid and I can't explain it properly. but the point is, I do think my understanding of it is that this was largely beyond his control, that there just wasn't an understanding of why he kept having this recurring issue. And so once they gained an understanding of it, they were able to rehab it appropriately. And at that point, he started to see progress. But again, it was late in the season, and it was too late to come back at that point. So if that's the case, I don't put it on him. I just think, he got a bad break, bad situation, and I don't know that anybody's truly at fault.
So how many people out there are going to, in their own minds, allow Taylor Swift to ruin the Super Bowl? Can you believe we live in a world like this? It's incredible.
I mean,
absolutely incredible to me.
So she's not a government asset?
Is that what the hell's happening here? I know we live in a world that we now know because of social media, and this world is much tighter now. We know everything because of technology. We know that the jackasses outnumber us now. But are we going to allow this to happen? Play such a role as it sounds like we are?
Look, I think it's going to be pretty unavoidable this week because the internet, everybody has a voice on the internet. It's a meritocracy, right? So it's not a meritocracy.
I loved it when we didn't know that we were so chock full of jackasses. I love that.
Right.
I want to go back to that.
So yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to avoid it this week. But I just look at it as for what it's worth, which is a good laugh. That's what it is. But unfortunately, the people you're talking about, for them, it's not a laughing matter. Look, she's going to be on camera. She's going to be at the game. And so what? Guess what? I'm going to have fun at my Super Bowl party. I'm going to eat and drink, and I'm going to enjoy the game. And those 6 or 7 shots of Taylor Swift, I don't think we're going to be talking about those on Monday morning. We're going to be talking about, did you see what Patrick Mahomes did? Did you see what Deebo Samuel did? Did you see this? I mean, right? I mean, why does this even matter?
Do you see how far away the Colts are? Yes.
Or that.
Still. Yeah.
Right. So
things are more important.
It's going to be interesting, though, for sure. You're going to get a big dose of it, no doubt about that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Crazy.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I appreciate you more than you know. We'll do it again next week and see what happens in that Super Bowl and see which storyline outweighs the other, right?
All right, my friend.
Thank you. Stephen Holder of ESPN on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Quick break. We'll come back. Luke Bryan tickets. This will not ruin anybody's day. Somebody's got a chance to win those coming up before 6 o'clock. Don't go anywhere. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
The Trail to Twin Peaks, Indiana.
Drunk and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Hey, shout out to my 14-year-old daughter who loves Fleetwood Mac and the album Rumors. I saw today where Stevie Nicks is going to be at Gainbridge Fieldhouse in June. Well done. I'm trying to think of, Laney, we went to see A Flock of Seagulls. My kids, which I think is awesome, are very 1980s musically oriented, just like their dad. But Stevie Nicks is going to be prioritized for Laney. I just saw that a little bit earlier today. This is going to be a hell of a spring, summer, and fall concert-wise around the area. So get ready for that. Luke Bryan tickets before the end of the show for you as well. Any word on Trace Jackson Davis yet? We're trying to get Trace Jackson Davis hopefully on the show coming up tomorrow. Golden State in town against the Pacers on Thursday. Houston in town tomorrow. Pacers off tonight. More Pacers conversation for you, of course, coming up on tomorrow's show. Meantime, on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, getting to know Terre Haute, Indiana, a great deal more in Vigo County. A part of the ESPN2 broadcast this past weekend. That was Indiana State over Drake at the Holman Center. And from ESPN, Kevin Lehman's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. So what do you think? You getting to know Terre Haute a lot more recently?
Well, John, it's 2 weeks in a row I've been there. We had the Bradley game also. The Holman Center, that place has been rocking the last 2 weeks. We had the Robbie Avila goggle day, and then they came in with the terrible towels this last Saturday. It is basketball heaven for me. And it was my birthday on the 27th for that Bradley game. I got my picture taken from the Larry Bird statue. Yes.
Nice.
It doesn't get any better than that, John.
Well, happy birthday to you. I'm an Indiana State grad. I absolutely love Indiana State. I love the basketball program. Big fan of Greg Lansing. Still good friends with Greg, and I talk to Greg as often as I can. He'd be on Bobby Hurley's staff out at Arizona State. But honestly, I haven't seen this level of interaction with the fans, of fan interest with this team. I really haven't. I go back to the 79 team, obviously, when I was 9, but this is about at the highest level. And it's great to see for the basketball program and for Terre Haute in general, the response and the embrace that community, that university is getting for Josh Schertz and his basketball program right now.
John, that's a great point. And I think we said that on the broadcast, that the excitement has been like this since you go back to the Larry Bird era. It's been, Greg Lansing and I, we're both Iowa guys.
Yep.
I've known him for a long time, and still stay in touch with him also. I tell you what, the fever in that arena the last 2 Saturdays I've been there has been just unmatched, and we're seeing it throughout the Valley. It's happening at other places, too. It's happening at Knapp Center where Drake's at. We're seeing it at Southern Illinois. We're seeing it at Bradley. It's just a resurgence of the Valley, which is, I think, amazing to a lot of people because they lost so many good players through the transfer portal with Lance Jones, Marcus Damask, Ben Trickey, Rink Mass. But this league is as good as it's been forever. And we asked Joe Lenardi on that broadcast, what's it going to take to get back to being a multiple bid league, which the Valley certainly has proved they belong when they get in the NCAA tournament.
So Kevin Lehman with us, I brought up that very thing. Like the Big Ten is packed full with teams at the top of the Big Ten right now that have, taken the advantage of the transfer portal and brought in guys. You mentioned Damask and Jones. So, what was going on in Carbondale a year ago? What the hell happened there?
Well, they were right there to the end. You remember Damask, I guess that was 2 years ago, he was banged up a little bit. But
yeah.
Another one got thrown out there, too. Remember Antonio Reeves? He's leading Kentucky in scoring the last 2 years.
Yep.
Came out of Illinois State. You could go on and on with the number of players that, since the transfer portal has come into vogue, the Valley has lost. But these coaches have done a great job of finding guys like Ryan Conwell, like Isaiah Swope, and bringing them in seamlessly. Josh Schertz. I think you have to give great credit, John, to what both Darren DeVries has done and Josh Schertz, because they lost a lot of talent of last season's teams, And they brought in those new guys, and their culture has not missed a beat. It's been a seamless transition for both those squads, and they're playing at a very high level. Both those teams, and I throw Bradley in there too, they can win NCAA tournament games in March.
Who's the best player in the Valley right now? Is it DeVries? I know that Connor Hickman at Bradley has been really good, certainly more healthy now. Is it Avila right now? Is it Swope when he's knocking down threes? Who is the front runner for that right now in the Valley?
That's a great question, because when it comes down to it, I always start voting by who won the league. And Indiana State with a 2-game lead here with, 8 left. But, golly, who would you go with? When I talk to coaches, I'm an old coach myself, John, the name that comes up is Julian Larry, that makes this team go both at the defensive end and his ability to push the tempo, the offensive end, and get to the paint. Josh Hurst has that saying, paint to great, and he gets in the paint so much. And he's drawn the top defender, offensive player on the other team. He defended Tucker DeVries most of that game. So I don't know who you go with. I think that's what makes Indiana State so good. I think if you look at NBA talent, DeVries has the best chance right now at 6'7". Cade Tyson is another guy that the NBA guys like. And, of course, Malik Dia at 6'9" with his skill level is another guy that might have an NBA chance. But it's definitely a team that's loaded with talent.
So Kevin Lehman did the game on ESPN2, back-to-back weekends, in fact, ESPN2 and ESPNU at the Holman Center, with Indiana State getting wins over Bradley and getting a win over Drake this past Saturday. Besides the obvious and Avila and that of, you mentioned Julian Larry, which is such a huge key. What has impressed you about this Indiana State team to be as good as they have? And really, they've had some incredibly coachable moments. You go back to the Belmont game, first half was a mess, and Josh Hurts called them entitled. You go back to Drake, where they had to survive, kind of a late game second half surge by Drake, much like we saw in Des Moines about a month ago. But what's the key to this team beyond their three-point shooting and making ability?
Well, and also look at the Bradley game. That thing went to overtime. They could have lost that in that last possession. Bradley had the chance with 6 seconds to win that game. So this is a team, and Belmont I thought was a huge trap game for him, sandwiched in between Bradley and Drake. And I tell you what, in early February, it's the dog days. That's when you see the upsets. And for the Sycamores to survive that win at Belmont in Nashville, a tough place to play, I thought that was huge for them. Because then you're going to get focused for a Drake game. But I think the key is there's so many weapons offensively, and you have the best, most skilled center in the country with Robbie Avila. 4 assists a game. I don't know if you see those printouts we get from the Valley. It went back 30 years. There's been 27 centers averaged over 3 assists. He's averaging over 4. And it gives you a little kind of like Cameron Crutwood, but Cameron Crutwood did not have the three-point shot that Robbie has. That's what separates those guys. And we saw that big three hit at the end of the Drake game that kind of opened up that lead for them. It's so difficult, the game plan, for a player that's that skilled at that 5 spot.
Kevin Lehman, ESPN, of course, covers the Missouri Valley. Friend of our friend, Greg Lansing, who's out at Arizona State right now, and Kevin's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. You mentioned Lenardi and, obviously the Mo Valley and, their attempt to hopefully get it at large. I can't believe it until I see it. Thus, I still will stay on the path of you got to win it to be in it. How about you?
No. I think, and Lenardi mentioned this too, that, the best thing for the Valley is Indiana State runs the table, gets beat in the championship game. Then you get 2 teams in. And Drake had a great opportunity because there's a quad 1 game at Indiana State. They got a quad 1 game next week at Bradley, but they tripped up, so I don't know if they can get their resume built up to be an at-large team. But here's the thing, John, that really upsets me is if you look at the history of the Valley and the success they have had in the tournament, look at last year. Drake takes Miami down the wire. In fact, Drake's got 3 guys with food poisoning or the flu in that game. They led it for 36 minutes against Miami. Who ended up being a Final Four team. And you just go back to the history of the Valley, the success they've had in first-round games. And I'll tell you what, if you're playing Indiana State, if they win that first-round game, John, you can't prepare for them in 2 days. They're going to be a Sweet 16 team if they get through that first round.
And it's funny because I have a good friend I went to high school with named Dusty May, the head coach of Florida Atlantic. And it was about this time last year when he started coming on the show and we started noticing what they were doing in South Florida, the Owls. And that's kind of how they were introduced to it, too. I mean, once you get in that tournament, I mean, it's tough to prepare for that team and their style of play, and especially the way that they're playing at that moment. And maybe not completely the same, but there are some similarities, I think, to Indiana State right now to where Florida Atlantic was this time last year.
I think that's a great observation, John. And here's the thing about the Valley. When you see a team 2 times, you might see them 3 times in Arch Madness, and you watch them and you see what other teams in your league does to defend them, it becomes harder and harder to execute your offense and your game plan against people in the Valley because that is one of the best scouted, best coached leagues in the country. But when you get in the NCAA tournament and it's a one-and-done deal, they haven't seen you before, that's why the Valley's had so much success. And sometimes, those power conference teams look down their nose at those mid-majors, and it gives you a huge advantage to get those wins. I think this sets up really nice on the Sycamores. They got to finish strong, though. They got 8 games to win, I know, to go, and they want to win a regular season title. What you got to go back to? Was it Royce Waltman in 2001? Was that the last regular season title? And 20-game schedule, that is hard to do.
Yeah, and that Royce Waltman season, the late Royce Waltman, they won a tournament game against Kelvin Sampson in Oklahoma that particular year, too. So
that's right. And we talked a little bit about Jake Odom's, was a 2011 team, Lansing's rookie year when they went to the tournament. And what a great – I love watching Jake Odom play. I mean, that guy was he was spectacular. He was Tom Brady with a basketball.
Yeah, and he came along at that time, and then, it was, I guess, unfortunate that he was also along the same time with Van Vliet and Baker when Wichita State was still in the Valley. So that was unfortunate for a lot of ways, but highly entertaining in a lot of others, too.
Yeah, I did a little research. The last back-to-back Larry Bird MVP was Doug McDermott, 2012.
Yep.
So Tucker DeVries got a chance to and there's only been 8 of them that have won back-to-back. Because when you said Fred Van Fleet, he won it twice, but there was a year in between that he didn't. And the same thing with A.J. Green. They won it 2 out of 3 years. So Tucker has a chance to make some history there. And when you saw him play, John, I mean, that's the question. He's the most skilled player in the league.
Yeah.
Is the MVP? Boy, I tell you what, I'm going to lean for somebody on that Indiana State team if they win this thing, especially if they win it by 2 games.
Well, I think the Mo Valley has done a great job in when you talk about teams like Wichita State and Creighton, who leave for greener pastures, if you will, but replenishing with Murray State, replenishing with Belmont. I mean, we had Ben Shepherd on the show. Ben Shepherd's a first-round pick that plays here and is getting a lot of clock as a rookie for the Pacers. I think oftentimes we have forgotten, and now's the time I think we remember just how good the basketball level of play is in the Missouri Valley.
Oh, no question. And I grew up with it. I got my master's degree at Drake in the 80s when Louis Lloyd was cruising the sidelines for Drake.
Yep.
Percy Hawkins was playing Jim Les for Bradley. I just missed Bird. Wayne Krecklow is a good friend of mine. I used to play pickup games with all those X-Drake guys when I was in Des Moines. So I followed this league. I even remember Benoit Benjamin coming to Drake and getting beat by 50. Well, Willis Reed was coaching.
Well, I mean, then you think about Wichita State, too, and what they had with the Xavier McDaniel and Antoine Carr and Sherrard. Aubrey Sherrard, right?
Yeah, I remember sitting there in the old vets, watching the game, and they got in a 2-3 zone. It was like they could go from side. They put their arms out. They could touch sideline to sideline. Xavier McDaniel was a freshman, was their center, and they had Cliff Livingston and Antoine Carr in the wings.
Yeah,
that lineup.
That was a badass group right there. I tell you what, we'll have to do this again because we can share Missouri Valley Conference stories going back going back decades. It's enjoyable.
One of my favorites is you remember North Pulliam.
Yeah. Yep. I mean it.
So when I was playing, I was still playing around Des Moines when I was there for 6 years at Dowling High School. So I was on a rec league team with Dolph, and he was probably 45, 50 then. And one of those Drake guys would walk in the gym to play against us who just graduated. You could see the hair on the back of his neck stand up, and he would own that dude for like 10 minutes. They wouldn't get a touch or a shot. It was the old belly button defense of Maury John. Unbelievable. I'll never forget what he would do to those poor kids. And he was 45 or 50. He would own them for like 10 or 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's funny, too. My senior year in high school, Bill Hahn was the head coach of my high school, and he was one of the members of a vaunted, I think, of the 60s or maybe even late 50s, Drake 5. He went to Drake. Bill Hahn was his name, wearing Chuck Taylors and rocking it back then. He's no longer with us, but he was a part of, I think, Drake when they were really good back in the day.
Yeah, there's some great history in this league. If you look back, Oscar Robinson was playing this league. You know, Cincinnati and the teams that were in this league. And you made a great point. And we're seeing this all over the country, realignment of leagues. So this is nothing new. When I first was coaching at Northern Iowa, we came in the league. We were playing against, our first game was against Tulsa and Tubby Smith.
Yep.
A Sweet 16 team.
Yep.
We beat them at Tulsa, our opening game of the Valley. And I tell you, I've got a broadcast Wednesday at UNI, and we're going to have Bob Bowlesby on, who Bob's going to be inducted into the Missouri Valley Hall of Fame. He was our athletic director at the time. And there's a lot of pushback when Northern Iowa joined the Valley, that they weren't a strong enough program, and they certainly have proved that wrong. And they've done a great job, the Valley, of picking teams. Look at what Loyola did when they came in. And you mentioned Belmont, Murray State, tremendous tradition in basketball tradition in those schools.
Hey, Kevin, I love talking Mo Valley. We shall do that again, but great broadcast the past 2 Saturdays at the Holman Center. Continue the great work, and we'll do it again soon. Thank you.
Yeah, John, please keep my number anytime. I've loved talking hoops with you.
You got it. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin Lehman of ESPN right there does the Missouri Valley Conference games. Very passionate about it, and I absolutely love that. Quick break. We'll come back. We've got Luke Bryan tickets to give away as we close out the show. Listen to Win coming up on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Hey, it's Andy Sweeney for my friends at
Careers.
The Ride with JMV.
Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon.
93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live. Thank you all for being a part of that today. Well done, everybody. Thank you. Ruoff Music Center. That's Saturday, September the 7th. And Luke Bryan at 239-1070. Number 9, Luke Bryan. We got Luke Bryan tickets all week long. And again, Luke Bryan, September the 7th. I know that's a long way off, but you'll want these tickets, certainly. Country music fans absolutely love Luke Bryan. Ruoff Music Center coming up on September the 7th. Thank you, Live Nation, to our friends there, as always, for being awesome to us, utilizing us for ticket giveaways. I know people love it. Thank you guys so much for that. Luke Bryan tickets coming up September the 7th for that show at the Ruoff Music Center. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. This is going to be an outstanding spring, summer, and fall for music around here. And not just country music, but all music. Think about what's also coming up on All-Star Weekend. Lil Wayne was added to the event. You're going to get a lot of other events that happen that are late to announce, and I know these are going to be like invitation only. But this place in a couple of weeks is going to be absolutely cooking. If you missed it earlier today, Tyrese Haliburton in the three-point shooting competition. NBA trade deadline's coming up on Thursday. We'll follow any of these stories around here. You know where I stand regarding Buddy Hield. I just don't see it, but maybe I end up being wrong. Andrew Wiggins has been mentioned with Pacer interest. If you want to double back and listen to what Chad Buchanan said last Monday about that, about the trade deadline, you can. 1075thefan.com. My thanks to Kevin Lehman of ESPN. Talked Missouri Valley and Indiana State and Drake this past weekend. Mike DeCourcy, Sporting News, Big Ten Network. Bobby Buckets, Purdue Radio Network, also a little bit earlier. Stephen Holder of ESPN, the podcast with each 1075thefan.com. Again, the AAA Membership Lounge via YouTube Live. An awesome day for you as well. Back with you tomorrow at 3, and the only place to be with me, 93.5 and 1075 The Fan. Have a great night.